into the country has to apply to the immigration department, and the immigration department has to then be satisfied that no Barbadian actually wants that work. And there's a process which we are strengthening because we have received criticisms about that process, that it is not necessarily as transparent as it should be, and that people still find a way around it. But the idea is that anybody who wants to bring a migrant worker in has to first satisfy the immigration department.
There are many reasons why anyone would want to work in Barbados. It's a friendly environment, relatively peaceful, and there's warm weather year-round. If you're a non-Barbadian, you should be aware of the protocol to address migrant labor conditions, which is concerned with the well-being of non-nationals working here. It falls under the ambit of the Ministry of Labor. Anyone can come here on a short-term work permit for up to 11 months or a long-term work permit from 11 months to 3 years. Your soon-to-be employer will assist you with the process, but there are a number of documents you should have before you board the plane.
The long-term work permit, let's go with that one first. With the long-term work permit, you're required to submit a duly completed C1 and C2 application form. The medical must be completed by a medical practitioner. You're required to submit 4 passport-size photos. There's the application fee of $300, 2 character references on the applicant, a police certificate of character for the applicant generally that's from any place that you may have lived for 6 months or more from the age of 16. You're also required to produce documentary evidence of the applicant's qualifications and a cover letter basically outlining the nature of employment, what the company is all about, and what the actual applicant then will be required to do. In addition to that, if it's the first time for the actual company, you're required to submit a certificate of registration or incorporation of the company. Let me say a bit about the short-term work permit, because with the short-term work permit, which is 11 months or under, you're required to, basically it's the same $300 fee for the application, the 4 photos of the employee, the police certificate of character, and the cover letter. After it has been processed or there's an approval, the department will send a fee letter out to the employer, and that basically would indicate approval and the fact that you're now required to pay the final fee. The payment arrangements or the fee would generally depend on the length of time you're asking for, the category of employment, and the nationality, whether you're a regional person or an international person, because our fees are calculated in keeping with the ISCO code, which is an international regulation.
It can take up to 6 weeks for an application to be processed by the Ministry of Labor. The length of time really depends on you. Make sure you have all the necessary documents to accompany the application. For the renewal of your work permit, follow the same process and have a certificate of character from the Royal Barbados Police Force. For further guidance, call the Labor Department at 535-1500 or email labor@labor.gov.bb. Make sure you have all the required documents before you board.
We do have a very good working relationship, not just with the immigration department, but also the national insurance scheme, even the banks. You know, you have to understand that a project the size of Sandals, when you drop 150 migrant workers on a project this size, we've had to work with the local commercial banks in the area who are all of a sudden inundated with all these people with checks to cash, no bank account. So we've had to work with the commercial banks as well. So it's not just government, but it's non-governmental organizations as well, like the commercial banks, who we have to now try and work with their staff because they're overwhelmed to try and get bank accounts open for all these people.
Anyone working in Barbados must register at the National Insurance Office even if you're self-employed. Types of benefits payable by NIS include sickness, maternity, unemployment, employment injury, disablement, funeral grant, survivor's pension, grant contributory old age pension, non-contributory old age pension, invalidity, and severance. But remember, benefits are only payable on satisfying the required conditions as set out by the National Insurance Office, so get started as soon as possible. To register, you'll need 2 forms of identification, one of which must be picture ID, your original birth certificate, and valid passport. For other requirements and information, call the NIS at 246-431-7400 or email customer.service@bginis@gov.bb. In Barbados, healthcare services are delivered by the island's 9 polyclinics, 3 outpatient clinics, the Albert Graham Development Center, the Psychiatric Hospital, the HIV/AIDS program, and selected services delivered at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. To find out which services are available to you as a migrant worker, collect your copy of the Protocol to Address Healthcare from the Ministry of Labour, Social Security and Human Resource Development, Warren's Office Complex, St. Michael, or email migrants.work@labour.gov.bb.
Coming up, we'll learn more about what it means to have a particulars of employment. Are these workers given information as it relates to particulars of employment and working conditions?
Yes, and we're very proud of that actually, because we don't just sit in Barbados and invite people to come here and employ them. It's quite the contrary. Actually, we operate under strict rules of the Immigration Department, and in particular the Chief Immigration Officer, who sets out the conditions upon which we can bring people to this island to get a work permit. First of all of our migrant workers here are on approved work permits. And we actually went into the islands. We did a recruitment fair where we visited the various territories from South America right up to the Caribbean. And we advertised and interviewed people in those territories, whereupon we exposed them to our rules and regulations, everything from housing, living conditions, conditions of work, occupational safety and health, and rates of pay. We're also a unionized company. We have a collective agreement with the Barbados Workers Union, so we have a good partnership there. And all of the rules, whether union rules, company rules, conditions of pay, rates of pay, they're all the same. We don't discriminate. We make no difference between a Barbadian worker and someone from, let's say, Grenada, St. Vincent, Guyana, or Jamaica. They all work exact same rates of pay based on skill level. They all have the same opportunities for promotion and progression within the company. There's no differentiation. And all those rules are shared with them in terms of giving out our booklets, our rules and regulations manuals. All those are shared openly at the interview process in the various territories before they even come to Barbados.
If you know anyone who's thinking about living and working in Barbados, you must let them know about the Ministry of Labour's protocol to address migrant labour conditions. Most of the information also applies to citizens, so you should get familiar with it too. For example, every employee must receive particulars of employment.
Things such as the interval at which pay is handed over, the hours of work, whether or not the person is entitled to holiday, and the conditions under which the holiday would be granted, and other terms and conditions such as entitlement to leave, sick leave, for example, how many days, under what conditions. So those are typically some of the areas that are included. Every worker, citizen, non-citizen, is required to have an itemized pay statement where he knows exactly, it outlines exactly what he's working for, what amount he's working for. It must give the gross pay. It must itemize any deductions and what those deductions are for. And then it goes on to give the net pay after you've done, mentioned the deductions and so on. It should also say what pay period that particular sum relates to and the date.
If you're not receiving an itemized pay statement or the statement is incomplete, you should discuss this with your employer.
What the department would want to encourage in the first instance is that the two parties engage in some dialogue, between themselves at the workplace to come to agreement. Where then that may not be happening, as can occur in any other form of a relationship, then they can always speak with us at the Labor Department. Persons can also seek the advice of their representative organizations, trade organizations, workers' organizations, employers' organizations. And there's also recourse, depending on what the issue happens to be, for the matter to be referred to the Employment Rights Tribunal through the Office of the Chief Labor Officer.
Sandals Barbados project consists basically of 222 room additions. In that, we also got some swimming pools, some restaurants, main lobby, some activities centers, a conference center, quite a number of ancillary buildings to add on to the existing resort.
Sandals Barbados is not just a Barbadian-built project. It's been built with hard work from Barbadians, Grenadians, and Vincentians, Jamaicans, Guyanese, people from all over the region. It's a collaborative, this is almost like a West Indian or Caribbean project.
From time to time, you will have areas of work that you would need to have migrant workers. There are scenarios, for example, where you may need to have workers in for a short period of time because there is a lot of work in a particular industry, and so you may need to bring in migrant workers to satisfy that short-term need.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't argue with anyone that Barbadians do not have the skills. Barbadian workers, artisans have some of the best skills, if not the best skills, from our experience. We don't necessarily employ people because they have, from the region, migrant workers, because they have skills higher than a Barbadian artisan. We bring in people because there's usually not a sufficient number to fill the requirements of the project.
Never hesitate to ask about your rights as a migrant worker. Please call the Ministry of Labor at 246-535-1400 or email migrants.work@labor.gov.bb.
We talk about decent work for Barbadians, but migrant workers are entitled to that as well. So they're entitled to the same provisions in their workplaces that Barbadian workers are entitled to. And if they feel that they're being treated unfairly, they have access to our Labor Department. If it is a national insurance issue, they have access to national insurance, because we do not want a situation where, because they don't know or because they're afraid, migrant workers suffer at the hands of employers who themselves may not know, but that they understand their rights, that employers understand their rights, and so migrant workers then are free to be able to enjoy the privileges that Barbadian workers enjoy as well. We do know that there are migrant workers who are told that because they're migrant workers, they can't come to the Labor Department, they can't complain about a worker, that the employer can dismiss them if they come to the Labor Department. But as is with our local workers, an employer cannot dismiss you because you have come to the Labor Department with a concern or complaint. That's against the law. It's against the Employment Rights Act. No employer can dismiss you for bringing a matter to the Labor Department.